Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second talk in our colour series, looking at artist practice and the use of colour through those practices. Tonight, we are really thrilled to have with us Joy Gregory. We're going to be looking at her work and practice, and we are going to actually start with a series of images here that look at her Lunaganga practice and her residency there. But before I do that, just a little bit more about Joy. Joy is a graduate of Manchester Polytechnic and the Royal College of Art. And you've developed a practice that's concerned with social and political issues with particular reference to history and cultural differences in contemporary society. And I think, Joy, we've been talking a little bit about your work and really how you primarily observe and then respond. And you're very experimental. And you employ a lot of different mediums and in terms of the kind of processes that you use, you also explore Victorian processes, and we'd love to kind of delve into that a little bit more. But as a starting point, I think it'd be really good to kind of share these images that you are about to share with us with the audience, and if you could tell us a little bit more about this particular residency.
Okay, thank you, Kaia. Thanks very much for inviting me to be part of your series. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I found these slides today, and they're from the time when I was at Lunaganga. I did a residency in Sri Lanka in 2004, and these are like my response to the garden, and they're not edited, they're not in any order, and they haven't been sort of like juiced up in any sort of way. They're just sort of like images from contact. And it just, I mean, for me, it was like looking at how I look and how I observe, and I spend time looking. But it was also about the garden and the stillness of that. And I think there are echoes in some of this with my earlier and later work, that the way in which I organize images within a space, or how I organize space itself, and how I also look at color. I mean, the color here is very soft because they're in color neg, and you know, they sort of pick up, I suppose, the atmosphere of the place as well, which is probably what I was seeking. I think I was going to make like a story out of them. So they're still lifes, they're interiors, and they're landscape pictures, but they're really just about space and color. And I suppose the poetry of space itself and the poetry of light.
I think this talk, we're really going to look at how, this whole idea of capturing the essence of a place and through memory. So we're looking at color and memory, and, how you observe and capture details, but also you create evocative imagery. And I think they tend to respond to a particular time, and particular kind of environment. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, for me, just looking at this brings back the memory of actually being there, because I mean, obviously I've been making pictures for a long time, and often you forget about things that you've made because you're not looking at them all the time because they're put away. And I think about this chair and sort of like how that makes me think about when I was in Lunaganga, and I can actually smell being in that space and feel the moisture in the air and the quietness around me, because I was there on my own for I think 6 weeks, and all I did was take pictures, and well, not even take pictures. I think all I did was walk around and look, and then I would go back and make some pictures. And they're very slow, the pictures. They like might be exposures for half an hour. So it was like that thing of having time, which also reminds me of now, in a sense. And at the end of the residency, which was based both in Colombo and in Lunaganga, so I start off in Lunaganga, we had like a celebration, so I could show the work that I made at the time, and that with my friends, and also some of the people that came to the workshops, and we showed the workshop work alongside my own work as well. And there's my very good friend, Menaka van der Putten, who is now is still in Sri Lanka, and still working in the arts. And then I worked in both colour and black and white. And this is sort of like the work, and I just pinned it onto the wall. So it's not like a grand exhibition. And I made these lumen prints, as I know that they're called now. And what's exciting about these is sort of like the vibrancy of colour. And maybe I can show a few objects of these.
Yeah, we're going to revisit this particular series kind of later on in the talk, and it would be great if you could just show some of the prints that you've created.
Right. So I'm going to stop sharing now.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Right, we're back in the room.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think India's going to share a few more slides because we'd like to start kind of looking at your earlier work. But before that, I really wanted to ask you about your childhood and in terms of memories. Were there memories that you kind of contemplate color, and has that in some way defined your current approach?
I mean, I think about colour. I mean, like obviously my house, not obvious, I don't know if it's obvious or not, but I would have feel coming from sort of like a Caribbean background, my house would have been a very colourful place with lots of what might be thought of as clashing pattern and colour. But one of the things I really remember, and I don't know why it stays with me, is my parents' sofa, which was well, one of the sofas, the sofa that was in the room that we actually really lived in rather than the living room, which was only for people who were guests to go into. And it was sort of like this black sofa with this orange covers. And I don't know, for some reason, I think sometimes I'm always looking to make that exact thing, that contrast. There's such a stark contrast between the black and the orange. And I imagine my mother probably wore quite colourful clothes as well. I mean, she was always very finely dressed. And I think my sensitivity to colour came from that, but also that thing about, I don't know, just instinctively knowing or wanting to put particular colours together.
Yeah, that's great. And we wanted to kind of look at the autoportrait series that was commissioned by Autograph.
Yes.
And what was, because it's a commentary on beauty standards and kind of, I guess, the need for representation. What was going on for you at the time? You know, what motivated you to create this?
I think in a way, this is among sort of like the first sort of self-portraits, which are actually me of my face, which I think I was very sensitive about at the time, and I didn't really like to have, I didn't like looking at pictures of myself, or like I didn't want to see pictures of my face. And I think in most of them, I don't actually show my whole face at all. But I think at the time, I mean, like at the time, it was like an opportunity to think about fashion and beauty industry at the time when I was growing up, where there weren't very many, there were none, or there was one person of colour that was seen within that context. And you'd hear all sorts of things like, you know, black people or people of colour, I wouldn't even call you people of colour, I don't know what they called you then, or called us then. No, they don't sell clothes. You know, people wouldn't buy a magazine with anybody who had a different color skin on the front. And it was sort of, you know, so you became invisible within that context. And it was a way of creating a visibility. And for me, the important thing was, because it was about skin color, was to actually have this color within it. So it's a black and white print, and the photographs themselves are black and white. And but I've toned them using a Lith developer, which gives you this third tint, which is so you get black, white, and then the grays go into a pink brown color, which it actually indicates and points to the idea of skin color. And this, I mean, this work was commissioned with Autograph, which was then being headed up by Monica Baker and Sunil Gupta. And the work itself went on a tour to Australia. And it's actually the only original piece of this work is at the Queensland Art Gallery in Brisbane. So they actually own that work. And I only ever made one set. So that's the only set in existence. So it's not here, but I have made a facsimile of it, which is on show at the British Library when it reopens.
I really love this series. And if we can go to the next slide.
Ah.
So, yeah. we were really thrilled to have you involved in our human stories, to show as part of a group show, which looked at, body image. It was called The Body Issue. But these 3 images are part of your series, The Blonde. And I wondered, in terms of kind of how you contemplate materials, even hair, becomes a material in itself. When did you start kind of working in this way?
I mean, I think what I do is I'm a bit like a magpie. I just see things that interest me. And I think with this work here, it was about hair. So the blonde project itself was a website. It was a website that was commissioned by Innova. And the person that was, like in charge of that side of the digital thing was Gary Stewart. And so he commissioned it. And it was about non-European blondes. And that sounds like ridiculous now in 2021, but I promise you at that time, it was like definitely not something that you did. I think it was in 95 I came back and I noticed all these, well, not all, but like a few people who were non-European dyeing their blonde, which was like, it was like a revolution. And so I wanted to look at the idea of race through hair. And instead of it sort of like, being lots of type or sort of like, I thought I'd just look at the idea of making beautiful images. So, and they're square as well, and they're on white. I think they're onto a light box. So it's just showing the texture and the shape. I suppose in a similar way to the way in which I take pictures of still life and interiors, it's sort of like a lot of time just looking and moving things around and just seeing what's there.
I think these images kind of, they focus in on the material, and it's about the material itself. It's not about, anything else. But they're really fantastic. So that's...
They're color photographs as well. So they're color without color.
Without color, exactly. It's your use of kind of sparing color.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so on to objects of beauty, and I was interested again. So this is also about your use of found objects, and we start to kind of see your experimentations here with those Victorian processes, and they're quite technical and sometimes I imagine quite surprising, the outcomes. So this is a calotype, is that right?
Yeah, they're calotypes. Yeah, which is an iron and silver printing process. You mix the 2 salts together.
Yeah, and I guess a commentary on kind of the gender codes we attribute to particular objects.
Yeah, it was a sort of, it was like a play on the word object and beauty. So, and definitely referencing women. And it was sort of like how women are objectified, and how they also objectify themselves, and the objects that are used to objectify them. But they're, in a way, they were also looking at something very serious, but in a sort of like, I suppose, a light sort of way. So I look at the stockings, and they look like she's about to float away, but at the side it's got like this measuring thing, where we as women at that time when I was making that, and I'm sure even now, we're always concerned about size, about space, and how much space we actually take up, and how we look. And I think that's probably more acute now, of that awareness of appearance. And so all of the objects within this series are about how the objects that we use to make ourselves beautiful. So like I've got the hair at the end, sort of like done in sort of like 1960s wavy hair sort of thing. Yeah. But they're just, like it's hair from the hair shop, the beauty shop near where I was living, and sort of like, but made into like this circular thing, so it looks like ringlets, and ringlets are like that. The first time you start thinking about making yourself beautiful is make your hair into these ringlets that bounce up and down when you're about 5 or something. So it's a play on that, and to the object in terms of the prints, like the prints are very beautiful objects in themselves. So it's making an object to talk about objects.
Yeah, yeah.
And objectification, of course, which yeah, another problem, another thing at all.
Yes, indeed. And I feel, yeah, very relevant still to today. And we wanted to focus in on your work on interiors, because I feel, there is a very explicit use of color through a lot of the series that you've developed and kind of worked on. But I felt these images were quite surprising. They're quite, we were discussing this and commenting how still, the quality is, that, they're quite still, but really beautiful, and your use of light, and it creates a texture in itself. Do you want to talk a little bit about this particular?
Yeah, I mean, I was really surprised to see these again. I mean, as I said, I always make all these pictures and I think, oh my goodness, I've never seen that one before, or I haven't seen it for a long time. And they're really, I think my photography is actually not just about taking pictures, it's actually about looking, and the relationship between looking and drawing. So I'm taking photography to be its literal thing, which is drawing with light. So it's observing the light, seeing how the light falls, and waiting for the light to happen. Also, so sometimes I'd go back to a space because I know that the light will be in that way. And I actually think about when I shot Cinderella Tours Europe, is I would actually work out where the sun would be in relation to what the sort of shot that I wanted to do. And I would go back and do it then, or arrive in that place. But these are, these are about stillness and quietness, and that I mainly used to photograph at this time. This is like in the 1990s. I used to photograph, make pictures when I traveled, and I would travel alone, because it really was about looking, thinking, and contemplating. And I think that actually comes across in the work. And also at that time, I was only working in black and white.
So how long would you kind of sit in a space and observe it? Because it feels like you really did capture
Maybe
the
all
true
day,
essence of this place.
maybe the whole day.
The whole day.
But I mean, I suppose when you're in that situation when you're alone, I don't know, I spend all my time just looking. I don't even know that I'm doing it sometimes. It's like a second nature. And I love being places where it's warm and cool at the same time. And I like to sit near the light and the sun. I don't like sitting in the sun, but I like to sit near the sun. And I like to watch how light falls.
And do you feel like different places, you felt like there were different light qualities attributed to a
Oh
particular?
yeah, definitely. This is definitely my Spain period. I go to Spain all the time. Yeah, and different times of year you get different sorts of light, and then different, obviously at different times of the day you get different light, and it's just sort of like I think waiting for things to happen.
Yeah,
And you can only do that when you have time. I don't think you can take these pictures in a hurry.
no.
And yeah, and you go back to the space, or you
So
imagine.
you've mentioned this idea of slow photography before.
Yeah, I like slowness. I mean, like I suppose when I first started taking pictures, at Manchester, I used to shoot on 5.4, and I still shoot on film, and I shoot with a Hasselblad, and you only get 12 shots. And like you think about autoportrait, that's all on one roll of film. So it's really thinking about what the picture is before you actually even think about pressing a shutter. So I mean, at that stage I would be drawing things out, and with autoportrait, obviously I didn't do that alone. I'm not very good at taking pictures of the back of my head. The person who helped me with that was I've got to go her name, gone that, Christina Pisa, who's also a photographer in her own right and based in Berlin. But I mean, like, it's it's that that thinking about how you want something to be, rather than just taking something, like as you see it.
Yeah,
I do a combination of both, but yeah, but I think with something like autoportrait, it is slow. It's thinking about it before actually even coming to the image.
great. And I just wanted to say to people listening in, if you have any questions, please do use the Q&A function to record any questions, and we'll address them at the end of the talk. So India, thank you. So going through, so could you talk a little bit about this blue room in, is this in Manchester?
And the blue and yellow room is at the Royal College. This is when I was obsessed with doing complementary colours. I started doing it at Manchester, this thing about doing these built interiors. And I think what it gave me was again, this thing back to slow photography, but also working with multiple layers. So there'd be multiple exposures. But it was, I used to paint, I used to build these sets and paint in them. And it used to take me days to do it, if not weeks. But it was a space where I could actually just go away into myself. And I think, I don't know, I think people do it when they're painting anyway, you go into a third space, so you're thinking space, but you're actually doing it at the same time. And I remember when I was making the handbags and I'd spent like months just thinking, reading, writing. I just needed to just be doing, and that thing of just doing. And then the photograph actually happens afterwards out of that.
Wow. But they have quite a painterly kind of quality to them, these two images.
Yeah, and they're drawn out first. So I would draw these. I mean, so I'd plan them and imagine how they would actually be, and then do like little performances that I would record on still film. So not movie film or video or anything. I don't think even had access to video at that time, but on using just still photography and working in layers, and I'd be in these myself rather than other people, because often people wouldn't turn up to be in my photographs because they're asking people to perform for free as a student.
Okay, India next.
Oh, and I didn't talk about the other one, which was the interior. They built the found interiors, but these are the.
You want us to go back to that slide?
Yeah, we could go back very quickly. And I mean, basically, I moved what I was doing in the studio out into the real world, because eventually, but they got fed up with me spending so much time building things in the studio and hogging the space to myself. That my final project at the Royal College was actually doing found interiors. Which is that one of these, and using different sorts of film. So this film would be a daylight film, but exposed in tungsten light, which would give you a different color quality.
Yeah. Wow. I really love these. They're they're quite somber. They're quite. It's a very different use of color. It is again a sparing use of color. But there's a definite mood and evocative nature in these particular images. And I know it was a particular time, for you. So do you want to talk a little bit about this particular residency?
Yeah, this is the residency at Lunaganga. This is in Sri Lanka. This when I showed the slides before, and it was in less than a year since my father had died. And I think because I had intention to go on that residency for a long time, and never, felt the ability to leave my family to go away for 3 months to do that, until after my father had passed. And I think they're like they're very slow images. They are again about observing light, so very much like the images in Spain, and that having that time of just sort of like sitting and being with your thoughts. And these exposures would be anything from like, I don't know, 15 minutes to an hour. And I would just sit and read and think, and often just sit and look at the light, and just the light that came into these spaces, which were quite dark inside. But the longer you expose it for, the more the more the stillness would be there, and they would all be natural light, and I wouldn't actually use any fill or anything. It was really just about looking and thinking. And I suppose the spareness of color in these is really about my feeling as well at that time, and what you're sensitive to when you're grieving.
Yeah. I mean, that really comes across, I think, in these images. I think they're really beautiful. And your observation extended to the natural environment as well, and that formed part of this particular series. So it
Yes.
wasn't just interiors. I think India, actually, if we go, it's not this particular, it's this.
It's
Right?
these ones here. Yeah. So some of those you saw on the wall at the end of in the exhibition, but they were I don't know, they're lumen prints, but the sun and the light in Sri Lanka, this is probably this is in the garden, was so intense, and you leave them out for a long while and the color would really shift and they become really, really rich. So these are actually fixed. Things I've done later on have not been fixed, and I think that they took on a whole magical feel. But I was really taken by the plant, really unfamiliar plants that I found in the garden. The garden, I call them fixed prints. The garden was created by Geoffrey Bower, and he bought plants, I imagine, from all over the world, but to create, and some of them were also from just that space, from Sri Lanka, to create, I don't know, a special space for himself. It's almost like a little piece of paradise there, and I was fascinated by these unfamiliar plants. I gave them strange names as well, which is something I do all the time. If I don't know the name of something, I'll invent a name for it, and that becomes part of what it is.
But you'd really like it, this is really capturing memory, through color, really. And so is it the chemical reaction of these particular, each plant gives off a different color, so it's something that's not quite, you kind of wait for it in a way.
The papers are all give off a different color themselves. So I think I had a variety of different silver nitrate paper. So the silver gelatin paper it's commercial photographic paper, but I'd have probably like 5 or 6 different types of paper, but also different times of day would give off a different color, different amounts of light. So if I think the purple one would have been done at the height of the day, so like in midday, 11 o'clock, whereas the other ones might have been done a bit later on. And also I think some of the juice from the plant might have come onto the paper and also affected the way in which it responded. And I have some of them I can show later.
Oh yes. Well, actually, I think you have some of these now, that maybe you could hold that up.
I could hold them up, and it's quite interesting thinking about the size of these and how when you see things you think, oh, that looks absolutely enormous, but it's interesting to look at what size some of those are. I don't know if I can find so oh, this is one. I was looking so this is one you can see that, because can you people see it?
I can see it.
My lighting isn't very good, is it? But anyway, so that's one, and these are all from 2004, and that's sort of like another one. And they're not like finished pieces of work. They were just things that I was doing at the time, experiments, and a lot of my work is experimental. So that one's really tiny. So if I hold it back, it's like smaller than my glasses. And I love these ones where, you could actually see through, the seeds, which, and I suppose for me, it was like a really new experience to be able to do something like that. And this is one of the ones that I'd had in that. You see, it's absolutely tiny. One of the ones I've done from that period. It's a little pink one here. Pink one that hasn't come out that well, but I mean, I love the color of the paper. I'm trying to think what else I've got down.
I mean, did you like science? Or because it feels like quite also, it's not just aesthetic, it is quite scientific what you do.
I love science. I mean, I love science. I love science is like art, they're one and the same thing. Yeah, there's another little one that's but and the thing about doing it in Sri Lanka in that intense light was you'd be able to see through like little seeds and things inside, which you wouldn't actually get here because you just get the outline because the light is much
more intense kind of light.
So did I like science? Yes, I think one of the huge attractions to photography for me was it combines everything together. So you've got art, you've got social sciences, you've got pure sciences, you got maths. So you didn't,
Yeah.
and you got literature. You didn't have to make a choice. You just could do anything you wanted within this medium. And also at the time I started doing it, nobody ever took it seriously as sort of like, this is something you would do other than to maybe get a career in, I don't know, taking pictures commercially in some sort of sense, rather than using it as a way to play. And I suppose, yeah, that's what I loved about and I still love about the medium itself. And I love the physicality, the materiality of being able to make something out of nothing.
And
For
manipulating
me,
the image to some degree.
Yeah, for me, that's what photography is you magically can make something which wasn't there, or something that you see come into being. And sometimes it's just transient. It's sort of, so I think about sort of some of the things I've been doing recently is that they don't stay at all. They disappear and they turn into something else.
Brilliant. And outside of the kind of walls of the residency, what was your impression of Sri Lanka at that time?
Wow, it was a very intense period. I mean, like, if you have to think about the time when I was there, it was just at the end. Well, I don't know if they ever end of the troubles. The first time I went to Sri Lanka was, I think, in 2001, and the Twin Towers had happened. Like, just I think a few weeks before I decided to get out there. Most people decided they were not going anywhere at all. I thought I would still go, lightning and all that, striking twice. But also they'd just blown up the airport in Colombo. And I still thought, I don't know, I still thought I'd just go. I don't know why. But it was like an amazing experience. I mean, like, and there was so much, I mean, like so many things that I'd never experienced before. The food, I mean, like, I'm still so in love with the food. I mean, like, I've been stuck at home for a while, like everyone. But also I managed to break my leg, so I was even more stuck in. And for months and months and months, I've been lying down, dreaming of egg hoppers. And curries and things. And I know the food was incredible. The light was incredible. The people that I met were all amazing. The country was fascinating. And I just loved being there. I just felt welcomed, and I mean, I loved the landscape. I loved the variety of everything that was there. I mean, and I went back. I mean, I've been back 3 times. So I mean, before the residency, I'd been there 2 times before. Yes, to do a workshop with the British Council. So that was incredible.
Brilliant. So India, maybe we can look at, I think it's the language of flowers.
Oops.
Oh, actually, yeah,
there's language of flowers.
Because there's a very, again, painterly feel to this, but it is a photographic process, the cyanotype. So, again, it would be good to talk about the processes.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's an iron printing process, so it's working with 2 iron salts. And what I liked about it was, like, it's incredibly inexpensive, which is great when you have no money and you've just left college or you're still at college. And also it prints on almost any surface. And I was really into, again, the materiality of paper. And so, like, you could print on tracing paper, you could print on ordinary paper, you can print on Japanese paper, and I don't know, for me it had its own sort of magic. And it's really lovely that you've shown these pictures here, because Bonner Wells have just created a part of their collection. We've done a collaboration with the images that are on the right hand side, so it's great to see those again. But yeah, I mean, like, and also it was about my childhood and the fact that I grew up sort of like on the edge of the countryside, and I just loved plants and flowers, and I just took them for granted that they would always be there. And then when I moved to London, it was about finding these things on the edge of the city, that railways stations, these weeds that, as people would cast them, as being things that nobody was interested in, and then I think I do that with a lot of my works, is I take things that people overlook and then put them in the spotlight. So that's what I was doing with the language of flowers. And also it was a connection with Anna Atkins, who was the first photographer to create a book, as a woman, and first person to really work. She made this book using cyanotypes, and that became part of her her oeuvre. But she was also a botanist, so it was a way of recording. And also that, like this blueprint became the blueprints that people used in architectural drawings at the time.
Brilliant. And this I find so fascinating, this is your one of your most recent series that you've produced.
Yeah, this is one of my lockdown projects. So this is from last year, when everybody was doing their walks. I too was doing my walk, and I would, each day I would bring back something which was from the walk, usually some sort of vegetation. I would make a lumen print from it, and then I sort of make in cyanotypes. And then I was invited to participate in a project called Breath is Invisible, which was curated by Sigrid Quirk and was in Westbourne Grove. And it was sort of like, there were three artists. So the first artist was Khadija Say, and then there was Martin Ware, and then myself. And Sigrid had seen my work before, sort of like she'd seen the language of flowers, and initially thought about maybe using that. But then I wanted to develop this work, which is looking at, which I've been looking at anyway, is sort of like the links between plant and medicine and Sloan, and where plants actually come from. And so I decided to look at, I thought I'd look at sort of like food plants as well as medicinal plants. And that is the project itself actually developed with workshops that I did with the Harrow Club. So I was thinking of something to do with the Harrow Club, which is a group of young boys, and sort of like how to get them to engage with making prints with plants, which was very easy in the end, and had the support of Wakehurst Kew. So it was looking at the seed bank and looking at plants and ecology, looking at where plants came from in terms of the European expansion and colonialism. So it was like talking about complex stories in terms of plants, of these objects, but also with the lumen prints, thinking about like plants and our interdependence with those. So with the lumen prints, it actually, the aura that you see around it is sort of like the plants breathing. So it's the breath of the plant being recorded. And so they breathe out oxygen, and we breathe out carbon dioxide, which they take in. So it's sort of like we are part of nature. We complement. So it was like, really, for me, it was a really important project from that point of view. And also because it was on the street. So you didn't have to go into a gallery. You didn't have to. I mean, because it makes me think about when I first started to go to art galleries. I was absolutely. I think the first time I ever went to a gallery, it must have been when I was on my foundation. So I would have been like 19 or 20. It was the first time I'd ever set foot in a gallery. Oh, and I used to sometimes go to the commercial galleries, but I'd be so terrified to go in. I'd wait until like nobody else was in there, and then just shuffle in and shuffle around and then shuffle out again. So that thing about not being intimidated because it's out on the street and by a bus stop was just fab.
Yeah, really great. And it's just how you've captured that aura as well of the plant anyway. And this is quite a significant series, 2008, Matron Bell, and again using color in a very kind of specific way. It's the saturated blue, and pulling out the skin tone of the subjects. So could you tell us a little bit about that, because I know it's linked to a particular project in collaboration with the NHS.
Yeah, so this is, well, it was an NHS project. It was commissioned by University Hospital Lewisham, and they wanted me to make a piece of work which would be, I don't know, be great for everyone, which everyone would like and appreciate, and would resonate with everyone, all the hospital users. So that basically means everybody on the planet, because everyone will go to hospital at some point, whether you're going as a user, a worker, or just as a visitor. And so I decided to look through that. I mean, I'd looked at lots of things. I looked at the history of the area. I looked at archives, and I found this figure, Matron Bell. And Matron Bell was the first matron at Lewisham Hospital, and she was a celebrity at the time. I mean, like Lewisham Hospital wasn't just the hospital at Lewisham that we know and love, but it was sort of like had like 7 other sites that were dotted around, all specialized in different things. And she sort of ruled the whole thing with a rod of iron. She was like the queen of this place. But also at the time I was making this, which was 2008, people were harking back to the romantic period when, bring back matron. She knew what was going on. She knew how to run a hospital. And this celebration of this this woman, I wanted to bring her, who disappeared basically from any visibility at the hospital. I mean, there was a ward which is now used as a storage, or was used at that time as a storage space, which was called Bell Ward. And then I realized it was the ward that was named after Matron Bell. So the reason for the color was I thought I'd hone in on this individual, but also pick out the color which was associated with the matron's uniform at that time, which was like the navy blue. And so it was sort of like playing with people's heartstrings, with the romantic idea of matron, and what actually means that, somebody who knew everybody's name and everybody knew hers, and sort of like teas and celebrations and things like that. And I picked, like in each of the pictures, everything is this blue color, this blue tone, except her, I've actually picked out a skin tone.
And how did you get this blue tone? How did you create this particular?
It's done in Photoshop, actually. So they're archival images, and they've been scanned, and then you dial up the color.
Yeah.
And then it's, you choose which color that's going to be, and then you have to mask out the other bits of the color that you want.
Wow.
Be separate, and then put that on as another layer.
Amazing.
Which is a similar thing to what's happened here. So this is called Alongside Matron Bell. Do you want me to talk a little bit about?
Yes, because it's I guess centering this particular story now. I think the previous image was kind of in the 40s, and this brings you up to the 50s. And of course, we know that it'll be in the center of the kind of whole Windrush, arrival of the Windrush generation. So yeah, could you talk a little bit about, because we know obviously lots of ladies and women came across from the Caribbean.
Yes. I mean, I think so this is from the same period, the same archive as I drew the pictures for, that I collected the pictures of Matron Bell. And obviously when I was going through the archive, when you're making work, you obviously gather much more material than you're actually going to use. And I didn't know if I was going to focus on Matron Bell, or I didn't even know who Matron Bell at the time was, who she was at the time I was like doing my research. But I obviously picked out at the same time and noticed that there were lots of people of colour from all over the Commonwealth that were in these photographs. And at the time I just focused on Matron Bell, and some of them were in the photographs and some of them weren't in the 4 photographs that I chose to be the final piece of work for Matron Bell. And last year I was invited to do a photography competition, but also to do a talk on to celebrate Windrush Day by the Black Cultural Archives. And I thought, well, and I can talk about the work that I've made, but I mean, it was just sort of like, if you think about, so we're in the middle of a pandemic, so the National Health Service is at the center of all of that. We've had George Floyd and the protests around Black Lives Matter. and we've had Windrush, and I just thought, you know, I really, and these images have stayed with me that whole time from like, you know, 2004, 2008, when I was making that work. And I knew that somewhere I had my research material for Lewisham somewhere on a drive somewhere. So I dug out this old hard drive. Heaven knows how it still works. And I found these images. I don't know how I managed to find them either, because my brain's like full of mush most of the time. And I thought, well, I want to make a new piece of work to celebrate these people that came over during the Windrush period and did come from all over the Commonwealth, so not just the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And basically, the only reason we have an NHS is because all these people came to actually make it with it. I mean, like, it wouldn't have happened without, because we didn't have people. So I wanted to make a piece of work to celebrate that. And it actually is from the collection, from the archive at Lewisham Hospital. And it would be really fantastic to show that whole work there, or just to put it up there sometime.
And you chose the particular colors based on, I guess, the fashions of the time. I think.
Yes, I did. I mean, like, I spent ages looking at the fashion, which I love looking at the fashion anyway, but looking at the colors and thinking about how to put those colors in so that they wouldn't sort of like jump out from the blue. So I've got like a blue tone, like a cool blue as a background. But then to sort of like indicate that these women were there. So it's still in the pictures, you know, the pictures that you could see of Matron Bella. I think there's one picture where there's like a passing out ceremony, which is in the main picture. And the women are there, but you don't see them because you've got Matron Bell, who I've picked out. But here I've actually picked out those women across the whole series. I think you can see the whole series on my website.
Yes.
If anybody wants to have a look at
it. We'll put the links up actually, because it's a really beautiful series.
Yeah, so I can't believe it actually came about. I suppose I was encouraged to colour it because I didn't know if I was going to colour it or wasn't going to colour it, because the text was really important to me. So the text is in the same colour as the tone of the photographs. But I was doing a thing with Swim magazine, and I was thinking, yeah, I think I really, really want to put colour in this. I want these women to jump out. I want their images to actually be vibrant and be there. And hopefully by showing this work that people, you know, will recognize, you know, relatives in here, and maybe we'll be able to put the names to those women that are in those photographs.
It's you know, an important part of you know, collective history. It's not just about Black history. It is you know, the collective British history, really.
Yeah,
such important archives.
Really, I mean, all the archives are, it would be great to do something with many archives in the NHS up and down the country, so people can see, you know, who made up the NHS in its infancy and now.
And continues
now. Yeah. I have to say that, and continues.
Yeah, definitely. All right.
Ah.
And so this is such a beautiful series, you know, such a rich use of color. Quite saturated. Could you talk to us a little bit about this particular series, Breaking Barriers?
Yeah, so this is a commission from the Black Cultural Archives, and it's part of a series they've been doing with JP Morgan, who was sponsor for this, and they invited me to participate in it, or to make a work for it, and to photograph 5 prominent women of color, well, Black women, and it's for their archive. So the exhibition is still up, and they've also, it's now on the Bloomberg platform if you want to go and see it there too. But when I was thinking about making this work, it was really important about the color, that the colors were rich and that they all fitted together as a set of work. So I wanted to photograph it in color. But the other thing that was important to me was also the place where they were photographed and the lighting. So actually, for the first time in like decades, I used artificial light. So I dug out my flash, which still worked. I could hardly believe it. And, you know, working with a post-production house to sort of like make sure everything all the tones actually fitted together. But the images and the image colors are based on paintings from the 16th, 17th, 18th century that I saw in the Natural Portrait Gallery. So I spent like a few weeks looking at those portraits and thinking about power, and thinking about colonialism, and sort of wanting to give make images of these women in their power, and that's the basis for that, and that's the basis for the coloring in those images as well. And also the legend underneath was something I'd used before in Amberley panels, sort of like to give, I don't know, sort of like putting it at a label, but also to give status and importance to, you know, so people know who these people are from now into the future. But the color is really important
Yeah,
within that.
definitely. And you really concentrate obviously on their faces, and the kind of background kind of fades away. And in terms of I think you've really created a very kind of strong composition.
I mean, I think the backgrounds give a hint of where they are and who they are, but the focus is definitely on them as individuals.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I think that comes to the end of the projects. I mean, we could go on and on, Joy. I think really that you're one of my favorite photographers, and really important. Your practice obviously talks about how you know, how important it is to observe the detail, and how you can use color in a totally different way, rather sparingly, but to great effect. So I think actually what we'll do now is go to India. India, can you? Hey.
Hey.
do you want, are there any questions?
Yes, we've got some good questions. We've got one from Jemima, who says, most of the photographs you've shown at the start of the talk have had an absence of people, and yet they are inhabited with spirit, atmosphere, and your perspective. Are you interested in creating a story without the complication of personality?
I don't know, because I really enjoy being around people, and I enjoy people's stories. I mean, that's part of my doing workshops. But I also enjoy space, and I don't think with space you can actually divorce the people out. I mean, I can think about the early interiors that I did, which really were about portraits of the people that inhabited those spaces or owned those spaces, but without the people being present. But their presence is really strongly within that, in terms of the personality and the stamp that you put on any place that is your home. And I think, yeah, with Lunaganga, that very much was Geoffrey Bower's home. And I think even today you get a sense of that person through looking at that space.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got another one from Cecile, who also says that she loves how the materiality of your work reveals the absence of people. It's really beautiful. And she'd like to ask if today you dare taking photos with your phone.
Oh, I do take pictures on my phone all the time.
That's a good question.
In fact, I'm doing this series. I've got a work coming out soon with, or being launched soon, with Autograph, another commission, which is almost all of it is photographs on my phone.
So the next question is from Amandine, and she says, what prompted your black and white period, and what made you come back to colour?
I mean, I still work in black and white, but the thing about that period of making work was I had access to a dark room, because I was working at North Paddington Community Darkroom, and also at Camera Work, which is now Four Corners, over in East London. I could process at home. I could process my film at home in my darkroom. So it was like having that control, which I wouldn't have on if I'd worked in colour. But also, I loved the spareness of and the abstract of black and white. So that it really was about the light and the stillness and the quietness more than anything else. So yeah, and I'd probably go back. Now I've seen those pictures, I'd completely forgotten about them. So thank you, Kaia. I think I might go back and start doing some more black and white photographs. Yeah, I can't wait to go. And yeah, I want to go on a residency again.
And Emily's asking, what did you use to apply the cyanotype solutions to the papers? I love the faded varied tones created.
Sometimes I'd use a paintbrush, like an ordinary paintbrush, or I'd use I tend to use a sponge brush now, but I like to use sort of like a soft bristle brush, depending on the size of the print itself.
And Jemima says, just wondering if Joy has a sense of colour being symbolic in her work. Does it have meaning?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I don't think I do it consciously. I think I do it quite subconsciously, because I think with the Sri Lankan work, I think the somberness and the quietness and the understatement of that colour is really important. But I remember when I was at the Royal College, they have a colour library, and I spent ages in there looking at the psychology of colour. I think months just looking at the psychology of colour and what colours actually mean and how they affect mood. So yeah, I really do think colour has a really strong impact. And when I did Matron Bell, the blue colour that was really important, but where it was housed was important. So it's the corridor that it lived in was painted bright orange, so like a really, really vibrant colour, because it was about being uplifted, and also about making a wayfinder. So most of the hospital was sort of like magnolia in colour, and so you'd come to this like vibrant, violent orange corridor with these blue pictures. Which I think orange really shifted your mood. But it's quite interesting because the hospital themselves, the people that were in charge, the committee was sort of like saying, we're not sure about the orange. It might make people have fits or something, or be quite alarming. But I think orange can be a very cheerful colour.
Yeah.
And Hajia says, how do you slow your photography, and when do you know when it's time to take the picture?
I think you just feel it. You feel like an excitement or a strange, I don't know. I always feel really strange when I know something's working. I get a really strange feeling in my body. It's not quite excitement, but it's sort of like, I know. But yeah, there's a feeling.
And then we've got another question from Lydia, who says, I'm interested in the relationship between language and flowers in your work. And could you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so the language of flowers was based on the Victorian language of flowers. And so I chose flowers that had particular meanings, and I was making this whole wall piece because I'm always very ambitious. It was like, I'm going to make 48 pictures, 48 different types of flowers, and all relating to the language of flowers. And I found this book on the Victorian language of flowers, and the reason I did it in cyanotype was because it was a Victorian printing process. So sort of like using the language of photography to actually talk and sort of like add another layer of meaning or emphasis to the work itself.
And then just one more question. So because you're a tutor at UAL, I'm just wondering how your teaching might feed into your practice.
I think it does all the time, because I don't know if any of my students are, but yeah, I mean, like I do talk, I mean, like I'll sometimes use examples of my work, and I'm going to do a studio visit with them, I think in a couple of weeks. And I will talk, and I do use my practice and the practice of other artists to show examples and talk about, making work and how you make work, because we're all artists together.
Yeah, definitely. And that's all the questions we've got so far.
Great, thank you, Andrea. Joy, thank you so much for giving up your time, and thanks to everybody who joined us this evening.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to the audience. It was fantastic to have this opportunity to talk about my work. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Bye.